Okay. So for tonight, the thing that God was talking to me about to talk about tonight, kind of piggybacking off of last week's discussion about love and mature love and kind of understanding what that is and being able to be open to developing that. There's another kind of aspect to that where it pertains to God's vision of us. Specifically, what he was talking to me about was how we see ourselves, but seeing ourselves through his eyes. Because the thing about it is, and we spend a lot of time talking about, like, it comes up a lot that we talk about the world around us and the kind of images that it projects onto us. You know, if you've done these things, then you're a sinner. If you've done these things, then you're this. Even for certain things like Alcoholics Anonymous, you are forever an addict, and you have to identify as an addict for the rest of your life. And the intention behind that is not necessarily bad. It's purely they want you to maintain that so that you always remember that this is a pitfall for you. However, the downside to that and similar kinds of things is that it creates an identity that you have to then carry around. And there's no freedom from that. You are forever this thing. And see, the thing about it is that this world, we have a lot of that. Like, there are so many different things where we are put into boxes, and our identities become a compilation of little boxes. This is your work identity. This is your personal identity. This is who you are at church. This is who you are to your friends. And everyone kind of has their own perspective of you, but then where do you see yourself? And the bitter irony of it all is that a lot of us feel unseen and unknown. Most of us feel that no one really knows us. There are a lot of people who carry around certain mentalities of like, these people love me, but they don't really know me. If they knew me, then they wouldn't love me. They would probably hate me. They'd reject me. They'd realize that I'm too much. They'd realize that I'm not good enough. They'd realize that, I'm actually a terrible person. Because they don't see they're just caught up in the image that I'm purveying for them. Which is I'm trying to be happy-go-lucky. I'm trying to be fun. I'm trying to be entertaining. I'm trying to be sweet. There's a lot of disconnect, though, with, like, who we really are. Because are you really the quantum of all these, like, bad things that you judge yourself to be? Like, what's more natural for you? Is it more natural for you to respond to something, to a clever quip with a quip of your own, some kind of happy-go-lucky remark, or is it more akin for you to, like, get vengeful and spiteful and angry and hate them? The thing about it is that there's a lot of nature to us that isn't inherently bad, but we're also not in touch with that either. See, when we move through this life, we kind of compile different parts of person from the world around us and from our experiences. As children, we oftentimes act a certain way, and the experiences that happen around us will kind of reshape how we act. Oftentimes, like teachers. I mean, I know Heather specifically has talked to me many times about the way that she, as a teacher with a bunch of first graders, would be able to like watch these kids interacting and know exactly what their personalities were like, because it was all right there. All these little first graders were running around being themselves, and they had not yet been entirely taught to be somebody else. They had not yet been entirely taught that who they are isn't good enough. They hadn't had people tell them yet that you're not good enough, you're too much, you're a bad person, you talk too much, you eat too loud, you're stupid, you're disgusting, different things like this. They're still learning who they are, but at the same time, they're very much being who they are. See, the expression of self is something that's very difficult for us to kind of categorize, because once we're adults, we can kind of trick ourselves into believing certain things. Like, we can look back at who we used to be, and we can add a certain filter, as it were, a new lens that will reshape who we used to be, and will gravitate towards the old memories that feed into that new lens in order to create an identity that may not necessarily be true. There are a lot of people who get convinced of this with certain things, like, for example, there's one person that I know of who now identifies as non-binary. And this is because he has looked back at his past and decided that he doesn't identify with being a man. But he also doesn't identify with being a woman. But the lens by which he was using to gauge that was purely based off of the presupposition that he was always this way. Little kids don't have a gender identity. Like, little boys don't just say, well, I'm a man because I eat beef and I want to go and be a soldier and I want to work on cars. They don't have that. They have to be taught that kind of thing. The same is true with women. There's a lot that's taught in terms of what you should be and who you should be. The only things that are really intrinsic are certain things relating to hormones, and a lot of that stuff doesn't even really become a big thing until later on in life. So we have that. We have this kind of... We have looking back in the past and kind of having a hard time discerning who we used to be. We have kind of this hard time looking through, like, as we walk through and kind of define who we are. We have a hard time deciding, like, whether we are the person we judge ourselves to be or if we are the person who we are around our friends. Does this all sound, like, really confused and kind of messy? That's because it is. It's intentional. Like, I'm not sharing all this stuff and these things to say or to fumble through it, but I want to capture the reality of what it actually feels like as we're trying to gravitate towards those different things, as we're trying to grapple for who we are. Because for a lot of us, that's the way it is. It's difficult because it's a mess. When you're like 25 years old and you're trying to figure out who you are in the world, all you have is this jumbled mess of different things and how you feel about them. Who you think you are. Who you think you are can be a product of how many times that you've been hurt. People learn more from pain than they learn from feeling good. Most people learn more from failure. They learn more from rejection. They learn more from loss than they do from happiness, from joy. And the reason being is because your psyche, your entire subconscious wants to avoid the feelings of pain that or embarrassment that come from those negative things much more than it wants to have the things that bring you pleasure. So you'll find that a lot of us develop who we are even based off of the things that have hurt us. We learn to talk less, to be less outspoken because we've been run over, or we've been punished for having an opinion, or punished for having a will. We learn to avoid conflict because we've been beaten up so many times by people or situations when we have tried to address the problems. So we learn to be evasive, even if that's not our person, not our character at all. If you're an outgoing, outspoken person and you have strong, passionate opinions, but everything about you is non-confrontational because you feel there's a danger in confronting the things that you're passionate about, that's a dichotomy. That's completely counter to everything else. There's one problem here. There's one thing that's off. We learn to avoid love because we've been hurt by people who we loved. We learn to guard ourselves. We learn to avoid the threat of loving somebody because we might get hurt again. And we create identities around that. We learn to be lonely. And we deem ourselves unfit for relationships because they never work out. We deem ourselves not good enough, not strong enough. We deem ourselves weak. We deem ourselves stupid. We deem ourselves foolish. All of these judgments created by situations that have been projected, that have been pushed onto us. But where is God in any of this? What is the truth? The truth of the matter is that God has a very clear image of who you are. He sees us all without those things, beneath the layers of taught and enforced perspectives and mentalities, beneath the layers of judgments that we're so used to that we feel like they're just facts. I am so used to having relationships blow up on me that I know that I will always be betrayed. I am so used to being rejected that I know that any time that I reach for love, I will be turned down. And even if they get to know me, they'll still find out that my love isn't good enough, and they will reject me anyways. Because I'm not good enough. God sees through that stuff. See, for us, it's so loud, and we think it's normal, we think it's right even, to believe these things. I will always be this thing, this person, because I am that person right now. And we presume that to be true. The statement that people change is oftentimes an understated thing. We believe two things at the same time as a culture. We believe that people change, but we also believe that people don't change. It just depends on the context and the situation, right? So if somebody meets our expectations, we'll quip, "Ugh, people never change." Whereas if we see them change a little bit, we say, "Yeah, well, people do change," depending on the context. But that's contradictory. Again, this is another dichotomy. This is another thing that does not work. You can't have both of these things be completely true. Yet they're both stated as being absolutes. The truth is that people do change. They always change. It comes down to even in our DNA, by the time you hit 30, every cell in your body has actually replaced itself. You're a different person in so many different ways. This is a physical, biological thing. That includes your brain cells, that includes your bone cells. The very structure of who you are is now different. And with God, see, and these are all things that God knows very, very well. It's why so much of, like, when we walk with him, he will oftentimes take us back to things that have hurt us. He will take us back to things because he aims to address them. When he takes us back to the places of pain that we've been through, and a lot of us we avoid that. It's scary. We kind of gravitate back towards the distractions and coping mechanisms that we have developed in order to avoid going to these places, because they're terrifying. But what's more is we don't always know why we're there. See, one of the kind of difficult things that we run into is that we'll get lost in the problem, and we'll wonder, like, God, why did you bring me here to this place of pain? And we think, we're left to kind of come up with our own devices oftentimes. We think, oh, well, maybe he wants to maybe he wants me to forgive this person who hurt me. But then that person continues to hurt you, and you just find yourself again needing more reasons having more reasons to need to forgive them. Or maybe he brings you to a familiar situation or brings up a past memory, and you wonder, why would you do that? Like, this just brings me pain. It's not always for the purpose of, like, reclaiming that. Sometimes it's for the purpose of seeing. Oftentimes, I should say, it is for the purpose of seeing why you are who you are right now. Because the thing about God is he's not even though he accepts you just as you are, he loves you just as you are. He's not content to have you stay just as you are, though. He will take you and move you deeper and deeper and deeper into who he sees, the person that he sees deep down in that core of you. Like, you're already accepted, you're already loved, but he sees these layers of lies and pain and judgments. And he's not content to just let that be there. God looks at you and sees a beautiful, beautiful person. He sees one of his kids. He sees the parts of him that are in you, the parts of you that were there from the day you were born, that were in your DNA, those beautiful sides of you that, are naturally inclined to lead, are naturally inclined to help, are naturally inclined to be there for people in some incredible way, who are naturally able to, push through the bizarre kind of things that our communities and societies believe in. The side of you that can question these things, the side of you that can bring clarity, levity, the sides of you that can do all these different things that you don't even believe you can do because you have been taught that you are not good enough to do them. But he looks at you and he sees that beautiful person underneath, and he wants you to see it too. He wants you to experience the you that he sees. He wants you to experience that in complete freedom. Because that is how we attain maturity. As believers, we are reborn. Everything that we once were has been washed away, and we are reborn as children into this world. On a spiritual level, this is where we sit. We're little kids. We're those little first graders that are running around being themselves, whatever mess that looks like. And God is loving us for every bit of it and knows exactly who we are. But we're now struggling with the world. We're struggling with the world. We're struggling with an enemy that aims to actually destroy us. And we're struggling with the church that has been affected by both those two things and developed into something that's kind of an odd amalgamation of Jesus, the world, and Satan in various different forms and facets, with varying different degrees depending on what denomination you end up in, because they all have lies in them. They all do. Whether you go to a Catholic church and you're told that you have to use the priest as the conduit between you and God, or you go to an Assemblies of God church and they tell you that the only way that you can prove you have the Holy Spirit is if you can speak in tongues. These are both lies. Both of these two groups would tell you that the other one is evil, but both of them believe lies. And you will find lies in every church, in every group. There will be some things that have slipped in there. Like, I know for myself and the groups that I have led, things that I have had to overcome because they were untrue were certain perspectives, certain bitternesses that I was purveying into the church. Unintentionally, but they were there. So there were lies that I was believing and perpetuating, and as a result, I taught other people those things. And it took God revealing that, hey, you're wrong here. You need to be offering a better perspective because you're wrong about this. So these were things this was an example of something that has been caught, and I had to, give up. But these things happen. So as a result, we're now reborn into this place, and we're meant to be learning from the Holy Spirit and growing and developing as people, but our environment is not exactly conducive to doing that. It's like you're a baby duck who's been dropped in the middle of a rainforest. Everything eats everything here. And you have the skills to waddle and swim, and this is what you get. You're a soft, fluffy being who's trying to survive this place.
I always wanted to be a baby duck.
I hear it's quite dandy. Until the large snakes come. And the foxes. And occasionally large insects. Because rainforests.
Yeah.
But this is kind of the place that we sit. It's a dangerous environment, but we do have God. We do have the Holy Spirit. And the thing about that is how incredible that is, and how oftentimes we don't understand that. See, we come to church, and it's fitting that we were talking before this about kind of the very contradictory nature of the church as it is, and how you have the kind of two sides where you have the ultra biblical people who are technically their traditionalism and their conservatism pushes them into a boat of valuing following the law more than having a relationship with Jesus. Their entire walk with God is such that they exist and validate themselves. They justify themselves by the fact that they're being good. And none of them will tell you that they are men of the law. Well, most of them will not tell you they're men of the law or women of the law or whatever. But they will grab the Bible. They will look through the rules as written by Paul, by Christ, by Moses, and they will look at them and designate whether or not they're good enough based on whether or not they're following those rules. Well, I didn't. I had really angry thoughts at that one guy in traffic today, but I didn't say anything. Did you want to kill him? Well, maybe, but I didn't. And I didn't even say anything bad. I didn't use a cuss word. I prayed for him, in fact. What did you pray? That God would smite him and punish him for his wicked ways. It was the Christian thing to do. God says he will avenge. I have heard this before, like in person. The thing is that we're missing the heart right there. We're missing the heart that Jesus came with. On the other side of that, you have the ones who are completely devoid of any structure or anything. They've taken the Bible and they've just tossed it aside like it was meaningless. And they follow whatever feels right. So their entire relationship with God is one dictated by their feelings. In Philippians, I believe, Paul refers to these people as ones who are governed by their stomachs. They just go from one thing that makes them feel full to another thing as they quest and hunger and thirst. And they allow themselves to be directed based off of that feeling, that desire. If this church, if this pastor starts to speak something that feels even remotely convicting to them, they'll leave and go to another church because they don't want to feel the conviction. They just want to feel good and they want to feel right. They'll come up with bizarre doctrines that border on witchcraft and lies, and they'll swallow them because they feel good. This is how we end up with what we were talking about earlier, where you've got prophets having bubble bath sex with God and stuff like that. Yeah, that happened. Met that guy. That was special. I'll tell the story. I'll tell you the story later. I was telling Andy and Hope about it. But yeah, it just becomes this thing where we lose sight of who we are meant to be and who we are meant to be with because we're doing it on our own. We are those baby ducks. We are in that dangerous forest, and we're trying to figure out how to be the most powerful creature in the forest as a baby duck. So, I'm not going to get off this analogy just yet, even though I want to. So, we presume that if we do everything perfect, we'll protect ourselves. Or we presume that if we do everything, we just follow whatever feels right, then we'll be safe. Well, then we'll be doing it right. But none of those are true. And no in-between of that is true. The purest example of where we are meant to live is in relationship with Jesus. The Holy Spirit is given to us to be a part of us as a director. But it's more than that. Again, there is a part of God that we do not understand or appreciate that is a part of us because we are saved. I'm going to read a little bit of John 16 because Jesus specifically talks about this in this chapter. But we will start in 15:26. When the Advocate comes, referring to the Holy Spirit, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who goes out from the Father, he will testify about me. And you all must testify, for you have been with me from the beginning. All this I have told you, so that you will not fall away. They will put you out of the synagogue. In fact, the time is coming when anyone who kills you will think they are offering a service to God. They will do such things because they have not known the Father or me. I have told you this, so that when their time comes, you will remember that I warned you about them. I did not tell you this from the beginning because I was with you. But now I am going to him who sent me. None of you asks me, where are you going? Rather, you are filled with grief because I have said these things. But very truly I tell you, it is it is for your good that I am going away. Unless I go away, the Advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. When he comes, he will prove the world to be in the wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. About sin, because people do not believe in me. About righteousness, because I am going to the Father, where you can see me no longer. And about judgment, because the prince of this world now stands condemned. I have much more to say to you, more than you can now bear. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all the truth. He will not speak on his own. He will speak only what he hears, and he will tell you what is yet to come. He will glorify me, because it is from me that he will receive what he will make known to you. All that belongs to the Father is mine. That is why I said the Spirit will receive from me what he will make known to you. The thing about it all with the Holy Spirit here is that, as Jesus talks about, is that it's something that we receive. The Advocate comes, the Spirit of truth. The Holy Spirit comes to be a part of us, and it brings with us that same everything that Jesus was and is. And that becomes a part of us. You are given the mantle of authority that Jesus carried around. When you are saved, you can speak his name, you can speak in his name and cast out demons. You can pray for healing. You can do all of these things because God is with you. Not just with you in the sense that he's always with us, but he is in you. He's a part of you. That's part of being reborn. Your old self dies, and you are reborn in union with God through the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit will guide you and lead you. But as children, we do not understand that. That is a new thing. It's like the way that as little kids, we don't entirely know why we do all the things that we do. We don't know how to do all the things that we can learn how to do. We have to learn them. We have to develop those skills. If you're a 5-year-old, you are probably not going to be a black belt in martial arts. But but you have all the capability to do it. All you have to do is learn how the body mechanics. All you have to do is learn the discipline to be able to handle your body and move it around in such a way so as to be able to do these things. How to kick properly, how to punch properly, how to apply the correct amount of force, how to use body mechanics to position yourself in order to get the maximum amount of force into those blows. When to make said blows, when to make those changes. You learn all of these things as you develop it. The same is true with our walk with God. You don't just have it in the sense that you receive the Holy Spirit and you just get it. Now everything's perfect, now everything's right. No, we're described as children. We have to grow in maturity. We grow with God. We learn who he is through the Holy Spirit. We develop into the people who he has called us to be, who he has seen us to be, as we walk with him. As all of the past and the world and everything that we have suffered through is broken off of us in order for us to more clearly see that person and to be the most free person that we can be along with God. There are parts of the Holy Spirit and our walks with God and our lives with God that most of us have not tapped into because we don't know. You know, if you're raised in church on either one of those sides, or like, you know, even just kind of like venturing towards the middle, there are so many different lies that you're going to believe that actually mitigate your ability to even reach for that. If you come from in both sides, you want to know one of the most consistent lies? That's for God to know. You're not meant to know that. You should not question the Lord. When they say, do not question the Lord in the Bible, that is oftentimes in reference to God distinctly telling them something specifically himself. That is not the questioning of a child, which is, why do we do this? How does that work? Why do you want me to do that? Children inquire because they don't understand. That's a significant difference from questioning because we doubt. And for us, grace covers our doubt. It's okay. If you have doubts, you can ask God. You can ask him if this is real. You can ask him about all these different things, and he will tell you. Just the same way that he did for Gideon, when Gideon asked for example after example after example. And he begged God to understand that, look, I'm not trying to be disobedient. I just want to make sure that I am doing what you want. So he threw his fleece on the ground and waited till the next day. And then he threw his fleece on the ground and waited again. And God patiently illustrated to him that this was in fact what he wanted. So Gideon was able to become one of the judges of Israel and one of the great men of God that we look back on as being a hero in the Bible. Because he patiently questioned and made sure that he understood what he was doing. There's nothing wrong with that. But oftentimes the church will make us feel that there's something wrong with that. And it's not that the church is evil or anything, it's purely that they don't know either. We have a history of the blind leading the blind, or those who have been lied to leading others who have been lied to. And that's okay. Like, it's okay in the sense that God understands that we're coming from that place. He sees all that. He sees all those things. And he is patiently leading us through it as he aims to develop a relationship with us where we can see ourselves through his eyes. And he aims to do that. He will cleanse us and make us ready. There are descriptions of the way he will prep the bride for himself. And we are that. And part of that means washing off the old and the filth and the world that is around us. We talked about transactional relationships recently. God will wash that off of you. He will teach you how to have relationships that are not transactional, that are static. To know that you are loved because you are loved, instead of needing to have it proven to you so that you can know that you are loved. And knowing that you don't need to prove that you love in order to love. Have you ever considered the fact that like so much of our understanding of love is like gross? Like when you watch romantic movies, it's all grand gestures. Even in psychology, they've started to realize that that's actually really bad. Because if your relationship is a constant up and down struggle of grand gesture to prove your love, followed by dip as between that grand gestures, where you start to like not like each other and fight and bicker and so on, then you meet that with grand gesture to prove love, as happens in so many of these like romantic movies. That's actually really, really bad. That's a bad relationship. It's chaotic. It's destructive. It's not healthy. A healthy relationship is one where the two of you can know that you love each other and be able to sit in that place of loving each other and being able to accept that. Grand gestures are nice once in a while, but you don't need them to prove love. There's a reason why so few of these movies have sequels that don't involve more chaos, or why so many of them just don't have sequels in general. It's because they think that the married life part would be boring, but if all that they know is that kind of relationship, it's not going to be boring. It's just going to be more chaos. It's just going to have rings on them. God would aim to bring us to places where we can have that static relationship with Him, where we know that we are safe, we know that we are loved. We read 1 John 4 last week to talk about the realities of love and how true love has nothing to do with fear, how it casts out fear. Because fear has to do with punishment. And as we walk in perfect love, there's no punishment. So many of us, we aim to prove to God that we love Him so that He will not send us to hell. That is not His aim. I have had people who God has told directly, I will not send you to hell. Do you still love me? And that threw them for a loop, because suddenly now, the whole thing, the whole motivation for them to follow God was now gone. And now it got real. And they had to decide if they really loved God, or if they just loved God because of some kind of abject Stockholm syndrome. When we are motivated by fear, we can lie to ourselves and fool ourselves into believing any number of different things. But when we remove that, and God oftentimes will, because He wants our true hearts. He wants to be loved as much as He wants us to love, or as much as He wants to love us. He wants a relationship. He wants something strong and close. Even Jonah had a relationship with God, that where he understood that, yeah, you can chuck me off the boat because God's not going to let me die. He got swallowed by a whale or some kind of large fish, and all that did was get him to agree to go preach to Assyria, and then even then he did a half-assed job, just because he was mad at God for wanting to redeem these people. Like, I don't use Jonah as an example of like a good Christian man, but I do use him as an example of somebody who has a good relationship with God. And what I mean is that he understood God just enough to have a relationship where the trust was very much so there. He knew that God wasn't going to smite him for disagreeing with him. He knew that God wasn't gonna kill him for not doing what he was told to do. And obviously that wasn't right, but it speaks to the nature of the intimacy that the two have. That's something that's worth looking at and worth exploring. To have that kind of relationship, that kind of intimacy with God. To know Him so well that you can say, I know Him, and it's not just you quoting lines out of the Bible. It's you quoting your experiences with Him. It's you talking about the realities of His character that you have learned from experience. Because God is a lot bigger than the Bible. But the Bible isn't a bad guide. It'll help keep us from getting into those really, really weird places. Because if God starts soliciting you for sex, you're not talking to God anymore. That's not him. And this is the thing, is that in all of this, see, all of these things are meant for us to understand how God sees us. And to be able to look at that as something that's worth holding on to. When God tells you that you're loved, do you believe that you're loved? Or do you reset to the things that you have been taught to believe by the world and the pain and the things that where you've been rejected? Or maybe you've been, maybe you have to face the realities of a routine witch trial around you. A key thing from John 16 there to kind of sit on and think about was the way that was when Jesus said that the advocate would come and show to the world that it was wrong about sin, righteousness, and judgment. This is important. The world has its own versions of those things. And oftentimes our cultures will dictate to us what those things look like. And oftentimes those ideas get married with the ideas of the church. And that's not good, because it takes away, you take worldly perspectives and apply them to God, and God doesn't carry those things. When Jesus came saying, "You've heard of an eye for an eye, but I tell you the truth, pray for your enemies," that was scandalous, because the Jews believed that this was the end-all be-all. If somebody hurts you, you hurt them back in just the same way. When Jesus said that, that was shocking. That was incorrect. That was worthy of punishment. Because he was a liar. He was a fake. There is so much grace and mercy that exists on us and that comes through God, through His Spirit. And it's meant for us. It's meant for us to be lived in. It's meant for us to carry with us. It's meant for us to have and to experience, and to also be able to extend to the world around us. Because it's life-giving. Salvation doesn't come through the judgments. Salvation comes through the grace and the mercy. The opportunity to live a new life. Judgment doesn't offer that. That just comes with straight murder. That's the end of it. And even the way that we propagate that in our own lives, judgment comes with a clear statement about who you are, and that is the end. And that's where we're wrong. We're meant to be bringing grace and mercy, but we have to be able to wear that ourselves. And this is the place where we need God to start penetrating our lives and our hearts and bringing the Holy Spirit into us in such a way so as to overcome those judgments, to overcome the lies, to overcome the rejections and the pains and all the various losses that we've gone through that have twisted our vision to only see in a certain way. Because we have bad eyes. We need new eyes. And specifically, we need God's eyes. Because He sees. He sees us. He sees the world around us. He sees with complete clarity. And He knows us inside and out. So when He calls us to something, He calls us to something knowing who we are, even if we don't. When he says something about us, when he says that you are loved, when he says that you are good, when he says something as jarring as you're perfect, we might not be able to accept that, but he's saying it knowing what he sees. And he's right. Whether we accept that, know it, or not, he's right. And when he tells you that you can be free, when he tells you that he wants you to be free, and when he tells you that you're going to be okay, he knows. And this is where we're needing to align ourselves with the Holy Spirit that's in us to be able to carry that, live that, and work and be that, and in that mature, to see us as he sees us, to see others as he sees them, and to just be in line with the Holy Spirit as we walk and try to survive this jungle of life in our tiny fuzzy forms. And that's what I got.